Well, good evening, good morning, good afternoon. Welcome to the show today. And wow, we have an action packed program today. If you're tuning in from the PTE network, we'll call it the AJ network, welcome to the program. My name is Alex. Time check here in China is 9:33. Beautiful weather outside. And I wonder how the weather is where you guys are. But don't worry, we're not here to talk about the weather all day. We also have a special guest on this program, Angelo, as well. This guy knows China, okay? I believe the last time I heard it was 27 years in China. I could be wrong on that, but I think I'm accurate. Anyway, welcome to the program, gentlemen. And here we are. There is Angelo and, of course, AJ, all on the panel to have a beautiful hour, maybe hour and 30 minutes. We'll see how long we go here. And we're going to have an amazing conversation. We're here to answer all your questions. Special hello to JD. Thank you for joining the program today. Nathan as well. Thank you for coming in. Single Speed B. Wow, 8 shows in a row. Congratulations for you, my friend. Nice to see you here and the audience from PTE. I'm Alex here. Of course, you know my channel, Reporterfy Media, and I'm here in the fantastic office of iChongqing, a great company that I collaborate and make major productions here in the Chongqing area. Let's turn it over to one of the newer guests that we've had on the program, Angelo. Angelo, maybe you can tell our audience something about you. Where are you and kind of what's going on?
Thanks for inviting me, Alex and AG. I'm right now in Hong Kong. So you mentioned 27 years. I started in 95. I went to study in Taiwan. I studied Chinese, and then I actually experienced in 96, 97, I was in Hong Kong. I experienced the handover of Hong Kong to China. And I would say I spent some time inside China in Kunming, in a long time in Shanghai, and the last 6 years back in Hong Kong. So I've seen the whole transition, China, I'm in different side of China, and especially Hong Kong. So I started to be vocal about geopolitics in 2019 because I saw what was happening in Hong Kong was an attempt of color revolution. So I saw exactly, I could see so many things happening. It was actually a copy paste of Maidan Revolution. Those guys, they were inspired by what they did in Maidan, and they were replicating this, and the good thing is that they didn't manage to succeed. There's a national security law that was enacted, and I like to say that actually the real handover of Hong Kong happened in 2020 when there was a national security law enacted. That was the real handover, because before that Hong Kong was still colonized.
Interesting point on that, and we'll get into that. We're going to dive into that in a little bit. AJ, thank you for coming on the program today. We had a fantastic conversation last night with you. Wow, it got rocking and rolling. That is for certain, sir. Welcome to the program. Time check, I guess, in UK. Am I right? Around 2:36 in the afternoon.
That's correct, Alex. Thanks for bringing me on, and we've got a very special guest, Angelo, and we've been trying to get him on board for a long time. I have been listening to a lot of his podcasts and YouTube channels as well. He's a great guest to have on board. He's got a wealth of knowledge. He knows a lot about China, but not only China, but about the world as well. So it'd be really good to have a really good conversation with him.
Fantastic.
Also want to thank my moderators for coming on board and all the viewers. So make sure you like, and make sure you guys, if you haven't subscribed already, make sure you subscribe, and you know what else to do.
So as AG says, you know the drill. That's right. All of the details are below in the description below. All the channels there, including Angelo's Twitter account and his YouTube channel. Take a second, guys. Do it right now. I'm not moving on the show until you subscribe to these following channels below. It's important because this is what helps channels. This is what helps us get the message out to you. I didn't move to China to come to enjoy its beautiful country and not say anything while I was here. I came here to actually defend this country. Okay, I've had enough of the media in the West. I had enough a long time ago. I had enough this morning of the media. Seeing some of the headlines are just diabolical. And I think you guys, the viewers, are tired of being lied to, or maybe being ridiculed, or even people thinking that you're just absolutely clueless. But I'm going to tell you, for all the people that have come to this program today, you are going to learn things about an amazing country. You're going to be able to share them with your friends, and your friends are going to say, what are you talking about? What are you talking about? And you'll say, hey, I listened to 3 guys talk about China. 2 of them right now are on the soil in China, and one of them is on his way to China eventually here. And if this is what it's going to take, content creators, guys like, Brian at the New Atlas, to get information out in the world, people like Patrick Lancaster that has to risk his life. And if you don't know who Patrick Lancaster is, he's another amazing gentleman who is a freelance journalist, crowdfunded journalist, pretty much archiving some of the most intense video ever uploaded on YouTube, and what could potentially be used in a future criminal tribunal. And I'm serious about that. And if you want to see that, you can visit Patrick Lancaster's page. Okay, let's get moving on to a couple of the topics. One of them I'd like to bring up here, and you gentlemen have listed some of them before the show. Let's just say that the 20th Congress has come to an end. I'm going to ask Angelo, was there any surprises? And I'm not talking the media hit jobs. I'm saying from an economical standpoint, was there any surprises? Did you expect there to be more news on maybe the relaxation of some of the COVID policies? Thoughts, sir? Thoughts on that?
I would say not much. There's a continuity. The main points is dual circulation. So basically, just work on the internal market and keep the level of exports, but not really big surprises. We were all expecting, the re-election of Xi Jinping, and there's it's smooth. It's this planification system, which is very inspiring. You see, China has this system that rolls on every 5 years, but additional to that, there's a plan for the next generation. It's very interesting when you see Western-style democracies. They think in terms of election terms. In China, they are thinking in terms of next generations, and that is very inspiring. And they stick to that. You see, accountability. They have those 5 years plan, and they stick to the plan. It's not like this the showmanship that we have in the West.
I love how you use that word accountability, because that is, it is actually the perfect word to use when describing a lot of things in China.
Yeah, and also, well, you see, they cannot afford not to deliver. They need to deliver, and every time there's a track record. You just look at the last 40 years. Everything they've planned, they have delivered. So it's not like in the West. In the West, what you do is that the politicians, they tell people what people want to listen. Once they get elected, then, they do whatever they want. So there's completely misalignment between what the people want and what the politicians want, because ultimately, Western politicians are paid by lobbies, by the elites. They don't work for the people. And I think it's very important to understand that, it's very counterintuitive. Putting a ballot, the system of putting a ballot, doesn't make it legitimate. Because what makes it legitimate, it's who writes the rules of the game. Whoever writes the rule of the games can control the outcome. So you see, I'll give you an example. Rishi Sunak, he was just elected right now. But he's the only candidate. He is the only candidate. The worst dictatorship could not hope of a better system where you have only one candidate. They don't even pretend.
Yeah, no, you make a good point there, Angelo.
Exactly.
Angelo, I just before we get deeper into that, there are some signals here from the Hang Seng Index in Hong Kong today. Maybe you could help us explain why we're seeing, a very imbalance. We got a market imbalance here of the Hang Seng that's closed down 6.36%, and we're seeing a rally on the Dow Jones. I have my suspicions about this. Thoughts on maybe why that market sold off 6% this morning?
Well, it's hard to say. I mean, just this is extreme. That's extreme volatility. But I would say
Hmm.
I'm more into looking into fundamentals. As much as you have to look in fundamentals when you look at stock, you need
Right,
to
right.
look at fundamentals when it comes to economy. So you see, you have people like Gordon Chang. They've been saying, well, China is going to collapse 20 years ago. And you see there are some people that keep on saying that for years and years, and people, we still listen to them. What you
Hmm.
need to look at it when you look at China is, okay, what is the GDP right now? They're
Right.
expecting 3.8%. It's pretty good. I mean, when you look at the you have a macro view of the
Right.
what the conditions in the world. Inflation is being pretty much controlled. China actually is planning, it's going to reach soon $1 trillion trade surplus.
Hmm.
And then infrastructure. This is something which is really important. One of the fundamentals, which is the most important in China, is the infrastructure. When you have
Yes.
infrastructure, you have the foundation for growth. You have extra capacity, you have a heavy industry. And what is important for China is self-sufficiency. So you see, it's the same as, they've been learning from what happened in Russia. They've been
Of
preparing.
course. Yeah.
China actually right now is self-sufficient. The only thing where they could have problems is energy. China needs badly energy. So this is
Hmm.
why you have this relationship between China and Russia, which is extremely important for China. So you see, then stock markets, I mean, the Chinese government couldn't care less. You need to
Hmm.
look at long-term trends, but not short-term drops.
Right.
So here, Hong Kong market is international. It's there's volatility. This volatility can come from anywhere. Like positions. I mean, probably there's an impact. There's a correlation. Global market and Hong Kong. So if you look at global markets, they drop 20-30%. It's only normal that actually Hong Kong is going to follow.
Mm.
Yep.
Interesting. Very interesting point. I mean, we have to bring something like that up when we see, that index off 6%. I think a lot of it has to probably do with there wasn't so much emphasis put on, I would say, let's call it what they would call in the West is kind of flooding the market with capital, QE, quantitative easing. Now, when the Chinese announce infrastructure projects, $1 billion is $1 billion in China. But you mentioned $1 billion in the collective West. Well, it's covered and riddled with, environmental studies. Then it's riddled with, planning permission and then government acceptance and blah blah blah. By the time you break up that $1 million, you might have about a third or a little bit more than that left to then work on that project. And that's what we're seeing here in China. They are not just doubling down, they're tripling down. And it is amazing what they've done with the infrastructure here, not just the Belt Road Initiative, but what they have done in this country is astronomical. And I think a lot of people feel that, they still have this stereotype that China is a country that is still struggling, still, of course, it's not perfect. We know that, right, guys? We know that there's a little bit way to go. I mean, the poverty alleviation it's been a miracle, but they don't seem to understand that, China, it's a country that is massive in population, but it has the ability to take challenges on. Do we know another civilization that has accomplished what these guys have done in the last 3 decades? Anyone want to answer that?
Well, you'll have to go thousands of years, I guess. um, yeah, I just want to kind of I just want to obviously bring up the Rishi because this is like a breaking news. So a
Sure.
great point you made, Angelo, because this is like he is the only candidate, and he has been putting his arm up, saying me for past few months, even before Liz Truss was appointed, and he has been absolutely embarrassed in this whole charade of a government. Even though he's the only candidate who's available, they were bringing back Boris from his vacation and begging Boris to stand. Then last minute they brought in Penny, and she dropped out as well. It's almost like a football team where you have two football teams and you have one player left and nobody wants that player. And that player is putting his hand up and saying, yeah, pick me, pick me. And both teams are like, no, we don't want to pick him. They're trying to find every excuse not to get him as prime minister. But it seems like they have no choice now. However, Angela, I just feel that the knives are out. He's going to be UK prime minister, but the problems are not that easy to fix. The problems that Liz Truss inherited, these problems are going to get much worse as winter comes, as gas prices rise, as inflation rises, as you know, interest rates rises. It's going to get it's going to get much worse. It's going to get, the real pain is still yet to come. We haven't even hit middle of winter yet, and I just think it's a poison chalice, Angelo. And whoever takes this job is doomed to fail. And compare
Yeah,
that with the Chinese government. The Chinese government, none of this charade, none of this circus that happens in the Chinese government. Is much more stable. And the markets want stability. People want stability. And people say that, obviously we chatted about this before the show, and people say there's no democracy in China. Of course there's democracy. You got to look at, the province level and the city level. These, people have actual votes, and then you have to look at policy changes as well. I mean, in the UK government, everything is short term because you've only got a short time in your rule. Like Biden's only got, I would say, 2 years, because they all build up towards the midterms, and everything they do is to win the midterms. Then you have the main election every 4 years. But I would say 2 years. So it's very short-term planning in the West. But in China, they think long term. They have the 5-year plans. And every year they have the 5-year plans. They update it, but they change the policies. Like I said to you, there was an image of this little girl sitting on top of rubbish one day, and China was importing the world's rubbish, and then
yeah.
and this picture was all over Chinese social media, and people were shocked. And people were saying, we can't have this. And a couple of days later, the Chinese government, cancelled that complete agreement. They stopped, bringing rubbish from the world. And there's another story about how rivers were polluted all over China because of the factories were dumping waste. Again, people were up in arms all over social media. And guess what the Chinese government did? They look what they're doing now. They've cleaned up all the waters around China. So when people say there's no democracy or Chinese people don't have a say, they're lying. I mean, you just have to look at these examples. So, what do you think of this British situation, Angelo? And what's your thoughts about it?
Well, it's just pathetic, really. But again, my frustration, you see, to be honest, I love China, but I love my country even more. So you see, my frustration is that I just wish that we could learn from China. There are things that, there's no self-introspection. China, the system they have in China, actually, what they did in 1979 with Deng Xiaoping, they went around the world and they saw actually, they were inspired by different models. And actually, they used the foundation they had. It was a meritocracy for 2,000 years. Where you had the mandarins, that the best actually would be managing the country. So they kept that. But then they went around the world and they saw, what was the best systems. And I think a big part was inspired by Singapore. Very pragmatic. And then look at just the profile of leaders in China. They are all they're all scientific, they are all like engineers, mathematics and so on. So you have scientifics, engineers, minds in China, very pragmatic. Then what do you have as leaders in the West? They are either from the elites or they are lawyers, bankers. They do not build anything. A banker and a lawyer doesn't build anything. An engineer does. So you have this different approach. Then you have the cultural side, just culturally Chinese, they need something tangible. Chinese, they say, what, you're telling me about freedom and so on. You know what, at the end of the day, how much do I put on the table? Can I put my kid to school, give him a good education? Do you have access to healthcare? Longevity, is my life getting better? I'm paying taxes. Where do my taxes go? Oh, there's a bridge there. You see the infrastructure? Yes, this is tangible. What are we selling to the West? Look at what they're doing. They're doing identity politics.
Yep.
Just give you an example. Abortion, that topic. I don't care. pro, against, I don't care. What I'm saying is that in the mind of people during the day, how much do you think about abortion in your daily life? You know, it's very marginal. That's a topic that it's very marginal. What people think from morning till evening, you know what it is? It's disposable income. How much is left in my pocket? Is my living getting better or not? And this is the difference. The West, we are making sure that we do distortion on what people want. We are selling them something that they don't need. What people need, what they're doing right now. If you think about inflation is one of the biggest theft that the government can do. It's worse than taxes, because when you have 20% inflation, but that means that $1 that you had at the beginning of the year can buy only 80 cents worth of goods. And those are human rights, basic human rights, really. So for Chinese, if you think with the Chinese eyes, it's money is freedom. And then you mentioned something just before, AJ. There's something really interesting, that the West could be inspired by the political system that we have in China. In China, they do tens of thousands of surveys every year. So that means they anticipate the needs of the people. Why people don't protest? But you know why? Well, they do. If something is wrong, they do. And you have lots of protests. But the government listen. But then those surveys, they are advanced indicators of what the people need and want. So the government is doing surveys on, you know what? This is the trend. This is what people need, and we anticipate that and we offer that. So you see, and this is the attitude of Chinese. Chinese, they're learning about their own system and they learn about the rest of the world. We don't even know about our own system. Average Joe doesn't have the level and the maturity when it comes to politics, just involvement. There is no politicization. Why? Because we don't vote. We only elect. When you elect, it's not very democratic to elect, actually, because you are giving up your democratic vote, because the ultimate democratic right is the voting. So you elect someone and it's like, you know what? I've done my democratic duty. And then all the votes, well, he's going to do it. It's not my problem. So this is why, if we want Western style democracies, well, at least let's have direct democracy where we can actually vote. We can have referendums. If these politicians doesn't follow my wish, then I can overthrow. I have tens of thousands of signatures. We vote and we put him down. So you see, we need to actually work on our own system and own problems before trying to start a war and trying to stop Chinese growth and so on, because it's embarrassing. For me, I love China, but I wish that my country could be at least inspired by what they're doing, and ultimately, you know what? I'm against interference, Swiss should decide for Swiss people, Americans for American people, Chinese for Chinese people. But at least, you know what? They're happy with their system. The problem we have is that we're not happy about our system, and we want to point the finger at other countries like China, which they're happy with their system, which has been delivering for 40 years. That's an embarrassment. It's an embarrassment, really.
Completely agree with you, Angelo. And let me give you some example of Western democracy. You have Ursula, who has announced yesterday she was going to give 1.5 billion euros to Ukraine every single month. So my question is, first of all, who elected her? Because she's unelected. And secondly, what power does she have to give away EU money to Ukraine? I mean, was there a referendum? Did she ask the people? When people are suffering with the cost of living crisis, and here she is giving away money to Ukraine like it's candy. And then you have the British situation as well. I mean, do you really call this a democracy when Liz Truss comes in and suddenly she's asked to get out in 4 or 5 weeks? Who made that decision? I mean, who actually runs the country? Who actually is making these decisions? 4 or 5 weeks after the market crashed, there is a rule in the 1922 committee which said that no prime minister can be kicked out using a no vote of confidence within the first year. But after 5 weeks, she's gone, and not only that, we have to pay her salary for the rest of her life, £150,000 per year that she had as a golden handshake. Well, obviously that's going to come out of taxpayers' money. And what kind of democracy is that when people above the prime minister are making the decisions, who runs the country, who comes in, who gets out? I mean, this isn't a democracy. I mean, sounds like some sort of scam to me. What do you think, Angelo?
Well, just think about the origins of democracy. I mean, a lot of people they like to mention the French Revolution, and actually there's so much misunderstanding about the French Revolution. You know, people that came into the street were the poor people, and they were actually fighting the war of the bourgeoisie. You know, the new rich. You know, people that were doing business. They wanted actually to get the power from the monarchy. So ultimately, you know, those people, they came out because they wanted bread, you know, because of the price of bread. They didn't have enough money to buy bread, and that's why they came into the street. But they were used. They were used by the elites, and ultimately, they never had the right to vote. What people don't know, they never had the right to vote, because ultimately, who could vote could be only the people that paid taxes, and only the rich back then paid taxes. But the game was just the elites to take the power from the monarchy. And it hasn't changed since, you know, because since the French Revolution, who wrote the rules of the game were the elites all the time, you know. So this is why, you know, I have sometimes those clashes with people, you know, the crowd that the anti-imperialist, you know, crowd. And actually, there are so many divisions there. You know, you have the conservatives, you have the communists, the socialists, and, you know, those labels, what people don't understand, that those labels are the divide and control system. You know, they have a common enemy. If you look at the Republicans and the Democrats in China, in the US, they have a common enemy. It's the elites, the globalist elites. What they do, they put labels on people. You know, the liberals, the conservative, the communists, the socialists, whatever, fascists, I mean, whatever. This is a good way just to put people into boxes and to divide them. So this is why I'm extremely against those labels. You know, when it comes to China, we shouldn't say it's communist, because people don't even understand Chinese system, and they don't even understand what communist stands for. You know, what is the meaning? When it comes to China, you know, I come to the conclusion that we should explain to people that it's the power to the people. That's what is happening in China. You know, when you look at who's at the Congress, the elites, the capitalist elites are not represented. So it's the people. You look at the background of people, they come from the people, you know. And then, so you don't have any capitalists there that are involved. And then, very important word, you know, it's shared prosperity. Think about it, shared prosperity. If you were to go into politics in the US and you would start to say, well, shared prosperity, let's make this cake bigger, and we are going to share it, rather than just keep the cake small and then only a small fraction of the population are going to enjoy. You know, so that, I mean, you know, those points are really important to explain, really, you know, because people are, that's a system, you know, I see so many divisions, you know, and people don't realize that they put themselves into a box, and they need to actually define who's the common enemies. And actually China there's a saying in China is 求同存异, you know, look for what unites us and set aside the difference, put aside the differences. Think about, you know, how different it is in China. China, you know, the motto is about harmony, unity. You know, in the West, it's a system and divide and control, because it's about dividing. I'm going to control because I divide over black or white, over identity, over pro-LGBT, pro-life, and so on. In China, no. They're looking for common ground. Let's unite us. Let's find unity. But there's a very simple reason there. You know, it's history. China tried democracy. It started, they had civil war. Tens of millions of people died. And they realized, well, you know what? Let's go back to what we know. And they build up a meritocracy system. Meritocracy meaning that, we are going to select people that understand, that can, have the maturity. And then within this system, there's a system of election. Select and elect, and when you look at the proportion, the Communist Party in China, there's 90 million people that are in the Communist Party of China. Well, those are the proportion of people that are politicized in China. That is roughly 7%. And actually, if you compare in the West, it's pretty much, I would say probably we have 5 to 7% of people that are really politicized. Well, it's the same in China. You are politicized, you enter into the Communist Party. But then, not anyone can go inside. There's a system of selection. Do you understand about politics? Do you have the preconditions? And then you enter, and then it's a meritocratic system, meaning you deliver, you are good, you go up. And a person like Xi Jinping, it started at the bottom, village level. Actually, Xi Jinping corrected me. I think he tried to enter into the Communist Party for 4 or 5 times, and then, he delivered, up to the provincial level, and then up to the Politburo. You see, those people. If you look at the 7 of the Politburo, you look at the background. They've gone through all those steps. They've been managing like province. Province in China are the size of France. Countries like France, and they are in this Politburo. So there's an accumulation of know-how, competences, so it's just amazing. So again, I'm not saying that, do I like it? Well, yeah, kind of, yeah. I think it's delivering, but ultimately Chinese love it. There's a survey, there's a Harvard University survey that says that 95% of Chinese, they're happy with their system. How embarrassing is that, when you compare to ourselves, We have, in the West, like an average 30 to 40%. You guys, I'm going to give you because I can go on for a while.
No, that's fine. I'm going to ask you one question, then I'm going to pass you over to Alex. So I completely agree with you. And for those who don't understand what Angelo was talking about, you have Liz Truss, who became the UK Prime Minister. You have seen how terrible Liz Truss is. She literally has no clue how to run a country, and she has been an absolute disaster. In China, do you even think she might pass the first hurdle? I don't think so. You were talking about shared. You're talking obviously about shared prosperity, and I was looking at some really, really good documentaries on CGTN and how, CPC members how do actually live with poor people. So they go to these poor villages and they sleep with them for weeks. They stay with them, they have a chat with them and try and understand what the problems are and what they need. Do they need infrastructure? Do they need roads? Do they need water? And they sit with them and they work out exactly what they need. Then they come back, they make a list, and a few weeks later, you see them building roads, you see them building new houses, you see them building a new waterway. Does that happen in the West? No way. You ask a politician to sleep with a homeless person or someone poor, they'll be like, no way, you must be joking. So that's the difference between, I guess, the two systems. Over to you, Alex. Do you have anything to say to Angelo?
Well, we're giving Liz Truss a lot of airtime, and that name will probably disappear from the screens here in the next week or two. But you guys mentioned about unelected people in office. Well, let's kind of steer back towards the current geopolitical crisis that's going on in this world right now between 2 countries. Of course, I don't need to remind you that it's Russia and the Ukraine. But let's enter back into this conversation back in 2014 with Victoria Nuland. Now, for the viewers that aren't familiar who Victoria Nuland is, she's the Undersecretary of State for Political Affairs of the United States. Now, why isn't this woman in jail? I'm not sure. She should be in jail. And I'm going to play you guys a little bit of a phone conversation that was leaked many, many years ago. You're probably not aware of it because most of the collective West will have convinced you that this skirmish started in the eastern part of Ukraine, or otherwise Russia now, back in 2014. I'm going to play you a little bit of a leaked phone conversation, and then I'm going to give you in detail what the dialogue of this conversation is. And then you will see how this panel will convince you, rightfully with facts again, how this whole thing has now come full circle back around to bite everyone in the AWS and hit you where the energy bills don't shine, as my father would say. And well, okay, here it goes. I excuse the profanity in this, if there is some profanity, but we do have some subtitles to follow along with this. And this is dated, I believe it was February 14th. It's a telephone call between the Assistant Secretary of State at the time, Victoria Nuland, and the U.S. Ambassador to the Ukraine. All right. And this is during the time when Maidan, just to remind you once again, the audience, the political uprising to overthrow the government in Ukraine. Now, who was the president of Ukraine at that time? Anybody know who the president of the Ukraine was in 2014?
Are you asking?
yeah.
Guesses?
Yanukovych.
Yanukovych, correct.
Yanukovych, yeah.
Now, I'm not sure that the audience is aware, but he was the governor of the eastern part of the Donbass area of Ukraine before he became president of the Ukraine. Now, if you're from a region in your country, and let's say you're mayor or let's say you're governor, depending what, elective positions people have in your country, or I guess in Switzerland, we'd call it canton. Is that correct? Is that correct, Angelo?
Canton, yeah. That's the region,
Canton.
province. Yeah.
So you would be generally proud if somebody was from that area representing you and then eventually got to be president of the nation, right?
Yep.
Well, within overnight, he gets thrown out in 2014. Media doesn't make that big of a deal. All they say is he fled the country. Okay, I get that. He fled the country. But then he was replaced by Alexander Turchynov. I'm butchering that. My wife can say it because she can speak Russian. Okay? Now, this guy came in. Now, I'm curious at this point, where the hell was the election for that guy? Because there wasn't one.
Nope.
Okay? He took over the government in the Ukraine, passed the baton on to the Candyman Poroshenko, and the rest is history. But if you guys think it just happened like that, well, immediately they pretty much outlawed the opposition party. And let's have a little play of this phone call to see how this all came to where it is today. If anybody should shoulder the responsibility for the chaos that is going on between these two nations, Victoria Nuland, hang your head in shame. You have costed this planet Earth multi-billions of dollars, and you are still in a position in a government that has been funding this into the billions and ruining people's lives all across Europe. No wonder the governments are being replaced in Italy. No wonder they're being, replaced in the United Kingdom. Hey, we call it a hat trick in Canada when you've done it 3 times. Congratulations to the UK and their hat trick. But here we go. Here's a very interesting conversation that you guys definitely need to hear. And we can follow it along. Here we go.
What do you think?
I think we're in play. The Klitschko piece is obviously the complicated electron here, especially the announcement of him as deputy prime minister. And you've seen some of my notes on the troubles in the marriage right now. So we're trying to get a read really fast on where he is on this stuff. But I think your argument to him, which you'll need to make, I think that's the next phone call we want to set up, is exactly the one you made to Yachts. And I'm glad you sort of put him on the spot on where he fits in this scenario. And I'm very glad he said what he said in response.
Good. So I don't think Cleach should go into the government. I don't think it's necessary. I don't think it's good.
Remember, this is the Americans deciding Ukraine's fate.
Yeah, I mean, I guess.
Yeah.
You think, what in terms of him not going into the government, just let him sort of stay out and do his political homework and stuff. I'm just thinking, in terms of sort of the process moving ahead, we want to keep the moderate Democrats together. The problem is going to be Tony Book and his.
And they're talking about the guy that actually was in, basically the poster boy for Maidan. Okay. And they're saying, well, he's good. He's out there, but I don't think he should be in government. Who else have we got in our roster? Who else have we got in our lineup here? Remember, this is the United States government deciding the fate of the Ukraine in 2014.
Yep.
We didn't make this up, guys. This is facts. This is a real call. This is a phone call from the current Undersecretary of State for Political Affairs in the United States dictating what is happening. Let's continue to listen to this.
His guys. And, I'm sure that's part of what Yanukovych is calculating on all of this.
I think Yats is the guy who's got the economic experience, the governing experience. He's the guy, what he needs is Cleach and Tony Book on the outside. He needs to be talking to them 4 times a week. I just think Cleach going in, he's going to be at that level working for Yatsenyuk. It's just not going to work.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. Okay.
John
Jeff,
Kerry.
You want us to try to set up a call with him? Is the next step?
My understanding from that call, but you tell me, was that the big 3 were going into their own meeting, and that Yats was going to offer in that context a 3-way, the 3+1 conversation or 3+2 with you.
CIA.
Is that not how you understood it?
No, I think that's what he proposed, but I think just knowing the dynamic that's been with them, where Klitschko's been the top dog, he's going to take a while to show up for whatever meeting they've got. He's probably talking to his guys at this point. So I think you reaching out directly to him helps with the personality management among the 3, and it gives you also a chance to move fast on all this stuff and put us behind it before they all sit down and he explains why he doesn't like it.
Okay, good. I'm happy. Why don't you reach out to him and see if he wants to talk before or after?
Okay.
Before or after what?
Okay, I've now written
before,
you, Jeff?
ladies and gentlemen, before and after what? You mean while they storm the parliament and Yanukovych has to leave the country? Is that what you mean, Victoria Nuland? Before or before after lunch? Well, you're deciding the fate of 40 to 60 million people. Let's continue.
I only told Washington this, that when I talked to Jeff Feltman this morning, he had a new name for the UN guy, Robert Seri. Did I write you that this morning?
Yeah, I saw that.
He's now gotten both Seri and Ban Ki-moon to agree that Seri could come in Monday or Tuesday.
Okay.
So that would be great, I think, to help glue this thing and have the UN help glue it. And, fuck the EU.
No, and I think we've got to do something to make it stick together, because you can be pretty sure that if it does start to gain altitude, the Russians will be working behind the scenes to try to torpedo it. And again, the fact that this is out there right now, I'm still trying to figure out in my mind why Yanukovych that. But in the meantime, there's a Party of Regions faction meeting going on right now, and I'm sure there's a lively argument going on in that group at this point. But anyway, we could land jelly side up on this one if we move fast. So let me work on Klitschko, and if you can just keep, I think we want to try to get somebody with an international personality to come out here and help to midwife this thing. And then the other issue is some kind of outreach to Yanukovych, but we probably regroup on that tomorrow as we see how things start to fall into place.
So on that piece, Jeff, when I wrote the note, Sullivan's come back to me, VFR, saying you need Biden, and I said probably tomorrow for an attaboy and to get the deets to stick.
Wow.
So Biden's willing.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
All right.
Thanks.
Well, there you go, ladies and gentlemen. You want to understand why we are in this mess today? Victoria, you should be locked up. The key should be thrown away. You should go to prison. Hundreds of thousands of people are going to die over the decisions that you've made. Look at that. How much more clear can you hear it? The United States organizing a government for another sovereign nation around the world, deciding the fate, removing governments, removing Yanukovych out of there, kicked him out, brought Poroshenko in, the Candyman, who was a billionaire, to run it while they stripped the country of assets. And then they had the audacity to look at people and say, hey, you know what? Let's bring in peace. Let's bring in a Minsk agreement. Let's bring in Angela Merkel. Let's bring in Hollande. Let's bring in everybody to sign this paper. They have been lying. You saw Joe Biden's name on there. Listen, guys, I'm not a Democrat or a Republican because I'm not voting in the United States of America. But if I was an American right now and you're wondering why inflation is going through the roof, call up Victoria Nuland and say, what on earth were you interfering with the Ukraine in 2014? Hook, line, and sinker. There it is, guys. Any comments on that?
I just want to add one thing. I mean, at some point, in 2014, actually, Yanukovych was ready to abide to what the opposition wanted. He was ready to redo the elections. So the opposition and Yanukovych, they sat down and they were like, oh, you know what? We are going to redo the election. So everybody agreed. But then what you had, you had the CIA, you had Nuland stepping in, and they were held by the radicals. I mean, the far right neo-Nazi, the Azov, the right sector, and then you had all those snipers. Remember, at some point you had snipers. And
Angelo, that's not the first conversation that Victoria Nuland shared some embarrassment with. She was on a conversation with the Estonian ambassador, talking about, and he was complaining, saying, Victoria, some of the sniper shooting going on is not the police on its people. It could actually be the protesters. It's in a recorded conversation. I will dig it up. I will find it. I will play it on this program. But this stuff just drives me absolutely up the wall. Here we go. We got some comments here. Okay, go ahead. Continue, Angelo.
No, just it's they needed a trigger, a tipping point. So by having death on both sides, then there's a vicious circle, because at some point, very often those protests, they are legitimate at the beginning, but then they become hijacked. So we had the same in Hong Kong. So you had lots of people that came out in the street. They had legitimate grievances towards the government. Hong Kong is not perfect. It's run by the elites. There are some problems. But there's one thing that in Hong Kong for the last 27 never happened, was that you had never the central government of Beijing meddling into Hong Kong affair. Never. They never. It was like, you deal with your own stuff. Why? Because it's a one country two system. And China needed one country two system to succeed in Hong Kong. So they could show Taiwan, you see, you can be reunified, you can be exactly the same, no change for a long time. It's going to be one country two system. You even get to keep your armed forces. It's more like on the appearances. So that's what China wanted to do with Hong Kong. So what they did in Hong Kong was actually to do a replica of what happened in Maidan Revolution. In reality, you know what they did during 9 months in Hong Kong? They were showing the movie Winter on Fire, this propaganda movie about the Maidan Revolution. And they were doing indoctrination of kids. Well, you see what? This could be you. You could be a hero. You play on the emotional side with kids. You know how kids they need inspiration. They can be manipulated. So that's what they did. They indoctrinated kids, and they wanted them to fight that proxy war. Because what happened in Hong Kong was actually a proxy war. Was the one of the first war that actually the US was fighting against China. And it's not this fight. The US has been fighting China for 50 years actually. They've been funding the Dalai Lama since the 50s. They've been funding the ETIM, the terrorists in Xinjiang. They've been funding the opposition in Hong Kong even before the handover. In the 90s, they were pouring money into Hong Kong, building up this opposition for a colored revolution. They tried in 2014, the same year as in Maidan. In Hong Kong, you had the Occupy Central movement. The same year, you had in Taiwan the Sunflower Movement. They managed to break a bilateral trade agreement between Taiwan and China. And it's always about the same funding, the same playbook. That playbook was played in 1989 in Tiananmen Square. Do you think that Tiananmen Square was something that just, people naturally going to the street and wanting a revolution? No. They hijacked a movement. There were people, they were upset. They during what happened in Tiananmen Square, people are not happy because you had economic reforms. They were shifting, they were opening up. China was opening up, and they needed to do reforms, and people were not happy, and they had other reasons to come out in the streets. But then you had this money coming in, coming from the embassies, from the CIA, and so on. And that's the same playbook. When you look at those movements in Libya, what they did in Syria, in Venezuela, I experienced firsthand, a color revolution attempt in Venezuela. It's always the same playbook, and it's always about follow the money. So you see, they claim that they want democracy, but in reality, democracy, the foundation of democracy is self-determination. If there is no sovereignty, you can have no democracy. That's the foundation, even for Taiwan. When you think about it, the decisions that Taiwan is taking, these directions towards independence, it was an idea planted by the US. The funding came from the US, from the National Endowment for Democracy, which is the rebranded name of the CIA. And then you have millions and millions of dollars being poured into Taiwan's democracy. So it's a hijacking of democracy. It's going against a country's sovereignty. So every time, because you'll have always people say, well, Taiwanese, they can decide for themselves. No. What happens is that you need to look at, is Taiwan at least sovereign as an island, as a province of China? Is there any meddling? And whenever you analyze any democracy, you need to go to the foundation. Number one, sovereignty. This is why, when you look at the EU, we mentioned, the EU and the countries within the EU, there's not a single sovereign state, because all the decisions are done in Brussels. The initiative of the EU was actually a CIA initiative. The father of the EU, Jean Monnet, was on the payroll of the CIA. When you look at the first person that was put in charge of the EU was actually a Nazi recycled. I think it's Walter Altman. I don't have his name in mind. But what I'm saying is that there was an initiative by the US after World War II to better control Europe and to transfer the sovereignty to Brussels. So now, it doesn't matter what happened in France, who's elected in France, who's elected in Italy. It doesn't matter. Decisions are made in Brussels. And the system is a replica of the system of the US, where you have, for one politician in Brussels, you have 7 to 10 lobbyists. So you see, that is the main problem. This is why I don't even follow anymore European, politics. It's been completely hijacked, And at some point in Europe, when there was actually this transfer of sovereignty, it was the Maastricht Treaty. You had countries like France in 2005. People had a referendum. They voted against the Maastricht Treaty. They didn't want to enter into the EU. They didn't. You know what? They forced it. The same as they tried to block the Brexit in the UK. They did the same in France. So there was a 2005 Maastricht Treaty, was refused. 2 years later, there was a Lisbon Treaty, which was copy-paste of the Maastricht Treaty. They changed a few sentences and they forced it upon the people. So much for democracy. So you see, I think it's really important. This is what we actually highlight most of the time with Brian Belletti on the New Atlas. We always go back to the foundation: sovereignty, self-determination. I don't care who's in power. My question is that, is it the power to the people of that country, and then I'm okay with that, whatever they choose. If it's the Taliban, who cares? Who am I to go to Afghanistan and tell people what is good for them? Where I get angry is that when you impose upon people a system which is going to be a system of control, which is going to work against their own interest. Because, well, when you put a government in Iraq, do you think it was in the interest of the Iraqi people? No, it was never. It's
Nope.
how you hijack. It's why we call it neo-colonialism. They used to enter with, in a country, the empire, with boots on the ground, and they were dividing people, and there was a strategy. Now it's new. It's very different. They come with we are going to sell you freedom, democracy, and but we're going to control you. We are going to have you a controlled opposition, people inside that are willing to sell off their country. When you look at the leaders around Europe, look at Germany. In Germany, you have the German government that actually knows who did the sabotage on Nord Stream 2. They know,
Of
but they
course.
don't want to tell to their own people. Do you know why? Because they don't work for Germany. They work for the globalist elites.
Yeah, so many great points, Angelo. And I'm just wondering, do any of the EU leaders have they listened to that tape by Victoria Nuland where she says "F the EU"? I mean, does the
Well,
EU have any sovereignty at all? I mean, they seem to be like a bunch of, when you have a bullying a bunch of kids, and then you have these kids who are letting it happen, and they're happy for themselves to get bullied. They don't want to fight
yeah,
back. They don't want to tell the teacher. This is exactly what the EU leaders are like. They're just allowing
well,
themselves to be completely
le-
bullied.
yeah.
Go
Let
on,
me
Alex.
add it. There is a reason why they kind of gave Victoria Nuland, a long line of BS. I'll call it, or we call it get out of jail free card. It's because Catherine Ashton, funny enough, near the same time made a major blunder. Now, just to let you guys know, Catherine Ashton was a former high representative of the European Union for foreign affairs in the security policy. Now, she had her, we'll call it, dog in the race here during the Maidan and the replacement of the Ukraine government. In fact, she had a representative on the phone call, the Estonian, now for all you guys, the Estonian foreign minister, Ashton-Paet. He's very key in all of this because, of course, if you look geographically, who borders Russia? It is Estonia. And they were majorly concerned at this time when these were going on with Ukraine. Well, these two characters also had a phone call. And this phone call surrounded about, wait a minute, the Estonian guy, the minister that I was just talking about, the foreign minister, was concerned about who's shooting who. This never really got to the local media because it would be an embarrassment for Catherine. But let's have a look and listen to their fantastic phone call during the Ukraine crisis, the one that started in 2014. Here we go.
Hello.
Hello, good afternoon, madam. This is again the External Action Service.
Yes, hello.
Hello. Should we go, you think it's going to be possible straight away?
To connect to Mr.
Yes.
Pat. Yes.
So, please go on. I'm connecting with the Lady Ashton cabinet.
Yes,
Lady Ashton,
You're welcome.
gentlemen, Lady Ashton, the Right Honorable Lady Ashton. The Estonian foreign minister here, okay, talking about this.
Yes, hello, this is Miriam speaking.
Yes, it is for the conference with the Estonian foreign minister. They are online. Please stay on.
Hello. Yes, hello. Can you put me through, please? Yes, I will connect you to Minister Pat. One moment. Thank you.
And here we go. Showtime. This is a very interesting conversation that these two are going to have. The Estonian foreign minister, Ashton-Paet, and Catherine Ashton. Okay, they discuss Ukraine. Here we go.
Hello, Minister.
Hello.
Hi, I put you through. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you.
Busy lady.
Yep.
Hello.
He's on hold for a moment. He's such a polite man, this guy. Does it really matter who is leaking these?
Hello.
Hello,
Hello, how are you?
I'm fine.
Good.
And you?
I'm good, good. I just wanted to catch up with you on what you thought when you were there.
Okay, yes, I returned last night already,
Yeah.
so that I was
Yeah.
1 day.
Yeah. Impressions?
Impressions are sad.
Mm-hmm.
I met with representatives of Regions Party, also new coalition representatives, and also civil society. There is this lady called Olga, who is the head of the doctors.
Olga.
Yes,
Yeah,
you know her.
Yeah, I do.
Yes, so that, well, my impression is in this sense sad that there is, well, no trust towards also these politicians who will return now to the coalition. Well, people from Maidan and from civil society, they say that they know everybody who will be in new government. All these guys have dirty past.
Yeah.
Wow.
So that, well, they made some proposals to the same Olga and some others from civil society to join new government. But this Olga, for example, she says directly that she's ready to go to the government only in the case if she can take with her team foreign experts to start real healthcare reforms.
Yeah.
So that, well, basically it is that the trust level is absolutely low. On the other hand, all these security problems, this integrity problems, Crimea, all this stuff. Regions Party was absolutely upset. They say that, well, they accept this, that now there will be new government and there will be extraordinary elections, but there is enormous pressure against the members of parliament that there are
So pretty honest guy. He's talking about the situation. But here's where it gets interesting.
To party members, well, some journalists who were with me, they saw during the day that one member of parliament was just beat in front of the parliament building by these guys with the guns on the streets.
Yeah.
So that all this mess is still there. And of course, this Olga and others from civil society, they were absolutely sure that people will not leave the streets before they see that the real reforms will start. So that it's not enough that there is just change of government. So that is the main impression.
Real
so
reforms. They wanted to change their country.
And also, well, Estonia's point of view, of course, we should ready to put this financial package together with others.
Yeah.
This very clear message is needed that it's not enough that there is change of government, but the same real reforms.
Here it comes. Here it comes.
Action to increase the level of trust. Otherwise, well, it will end badly.
Yeah.
Because the Regions Party also said that, well, you will see that if the people from the eastern part
basically
of Ukraine
he's saying every party's dirty.
And,
none are good.
And will start to demand their
But the
rights.
Americans are pushing.
Some people also with me, they were in Donetsk. Their people said that, well, we can't wait how long still the occupation of Ukraine lasts in Donetsk.
Yeah.
That it is real Russian city, and we'd like now to see that, well, Russia will take over. So that, well, short impressions.
No, very, very interesting. I've just had a big meeting here with Olli Rehn and the other commissioners to talk about what we can do. I mean, we're working on financial packages, short, medium, long term, everything from how we get money in quickly, how we support the IMF, and how we get a kind of investment packages and business leaders and so on. On the political side, we've worked out resources we've got, and I offered to civil society and to Yatsenyuk and Fischko and everybody I met yesterday. We can offer you people who know how to do political and economic reform. The countries that are closest to Ukraine have themselves been through dramatic changes and have done big political and economic reforms. So we've got loads of experience to give you, which we're happy to give. I said to the people in Maidan, yes, you want real reforms, but you've got to get through the short term first. So you need to find ways in which you can establish a process that will have...
And they have experience in replacing governments.
That will have people working alongside until the elections, and that you can be confident in the process. And I said to Olga, you may not be health minister now, but you need to think about becoming health minister in the future, because people like you are going to be needed to be able to get and make sure that it doesn't happen. But I've also said to them, if you simply barricade the buildings now and the government doesn't function, we can't get money in because we need a partner to partner with.
Absolutely.
Yep.
And I've said to the
Modern day partner,
the opposition that is
2022,
shortly to become government,
Zelensky.
you need to reach out to Maidan. You need to be, engaging with them. You also need to get ordinary police officers back on the streets under a new sense of their role so that people feel safe. I said to the Party of the Regions people, you have to go and lay flowers where the people died. You have to show that you understand what has happened here.
Absolutely.
Because what you're experiencing is anger.
Another minute here, and it'll wrap up. But
the way that Yanukovych
big part
lived
coming
and
up
the
here.
Corruption.
Yep.
And they assume you're all the same. And those are the people who've lost people and who feel that he ordered that to happen. There's quite a lot of shock, I think, in the city, a lot of sadness and shock, and that's going to come out in some very strange ways if they're not careful. So I think all of this we just have to work on. So we've done a big meeting here today to try and get this in place. But yeah, it's very interesting, your observation.
It is, and well, actually, the only politician the people from civil society mentioned positively was Poroshenko.
Yeah.
So that he has some sort of, how to say, trust among all these Maidan people. And
funny enough, how he became president of Ukraine, huh?
Was quite disturbing. The same Olga told that, well, all the evidence shows that people who were killed by snipers from both sides, among policemen and people from the streets, that they were the same snipers killing people from both sides.
Well, that's, yeah.
So that, and then she also showed me some photos. She said that as medical doctor, she can, say that it is the same handwriting, the same type of bullets, and it's really disturbing that now the new coalition, that they don't want to investigate what exactly happened, so that there is now stronger and stronger understanding that behind snipers, it was not Yanukovych, but it was somebody from the new coalition.
Wow.
I think they do want to investigate. I mean, I didn't pick that up.
It was never investigated, everyone. It was never investigated. Fast forward 2022. We're in this mess. You heard all the names are on that screen and in that phone call. I mean, Ermas, nice guy, generally nice guy that had good intentions, was kind of like, yeah, we'll take your points on Ermas, but we kind of have our minds made up. Poroshenko was already in play. Yep. Okay, the Candyman billionaire of Ukraine, if you didn't know. And that call will go down to kind of give you, the viewers, a starting point on where we are today. And those names, they're still out there. They're still pumping for billions of dollars to be brought in there because they have the experience on how to replace governments. And good little Estonia and good little Lithuania and Latvia and Poland and all these good little countries that they say are good, that Ukraine can learn from you because, you guys have shown progress over the years, talking down to these nations, these other sovereign European nations that, as Angelo says, don't have a say at all in all of this. And that's why these nations are in trouble. That's why inflation is running rampant.
Yep.
Gentlemen, this is getting good. Who wants to take over?
I'll pass you on to Angelo. But before I do, I just want to say the Ukrainian people are being used as pawns and guinea pigs.
Absolutely. And they're being killed too.
They're being killed. The people are leaving the country. People are being killed. People are being called up. Old people are being called up. Young people are being called up. Women are being called up. They're running out of troops. They're running out of people. And I think one of the reasons why Russia started attacking Ukraine's infrastructure is, remember the Kiev Crimean bomb bridge.
Mm-hmm.
The bomb bridge wasn't the actual issue. The issue was in social media, there was Ukrainians taking pictures of themselves, selfies of themselves in front of them. There was a big postage stamp against the wall, and they were taking selfies. They were smiling. They were joking. And I think that was the turning point, and Russia said, you know what, these Ukrainians don't care about us. They don't, here they are, completely brainwashed. They are humiliating us. They are sending all of these images on social media, and I'm not talking about one or two images. Twitter was trending at the time. We're talking about hundreds and thousands of these images of people taking selfies in front of these this postage stamp, and people were obviously retweeting everywhere. Twitter was blown up that day, and I think that's when Russia made the decision to go into Ukraine and say, you know what, let's forget about trying to protect the people. Let's just go in and try and end this war as quick as possible. Shut down their infrastructure, start bombing places. I think we've had enough. And going back to Angelo, when you said earlier about everyone keeping quiet about the Nord Stream, and you're 100% right. I mean, if it was Russia, anyone with common sense would know that it's easier to bomb the pipelines near the Russian border. At least it's easier to do it that way. Why would they bomb it all the way near Germany, near Denmark, near Switzerland, near Sweden, near Lithuania? It makes no sense why they would go all the way there, where it's patrolled by Navy ships and the US ships and other ships as well. And suddenly everything's gone blank. If you go to Twitter, nobody's trending about the Nord Stream. It's almost like all of these tech companies have decided to clamp down on Nord Stream 2. Nobody's talking about it. All the trending's gone down. The Swedish government is saying, oh, we cannot release our findings because of national security. The Germans are quiet about it. Everyone else is quiet about it. If it was the Russians, it would be in front page news in every single paper around the world. The Russians, look what the Russians have done. It's terrorism. Russians is a state-sponsored terrorist state. We cannot stand for this. But because they know who did it, everybody's keeping quiet. And I just find it absolutely staggering how, in this modern day and age, how the US can do that to his allies and get away with it, and his allies, they're just quiet and they're just taking it. And the US is destroying the economy, destroying the infrastructure, and you got Nuland saying F the EU, and all of these EU leaders are just sitting there taking it like muppets. I have no clue, understand why they are doing that to their country, their people. Over to you, Angelo.
Well, think about the. I have in mind three crimes that they pointed the finger at Russia. One was the bombing, the shelling of the nuclear power plant in Zaporozhye. Just think about it. They control the plants, and they actually accusing Russia of bombing their own plant. And this is what the Western media sold to their people. That's one example. Another example is that they captured the Azov battalion because they wanted them alive, because they wanted them to put them on trial for their human rights abuses. They've been raping, killing civilians for 8 years. So they wanted to put them on trial.
Yep.
This prison was bombed by Ukraine, but Western media said that Russia did it. Just think about it. You go through the whole process. I mean, so hard just to get them alive. You put them in prison, you feed them and so on, and then you are bombing your own prison. That's absurd, how absurd it is. And then Nord Stream 2, think about it. The Nord Stream was a weapon for negotiation. With Nord Stream, Russia could put pressure on the EU just to go back to the table and negotiate, because it's existential. And what saddens me here is that the impact of the Nord Stream 2 and the fact that the EU is going to buy extremely high energy for the last 20 to 30 years, and is going to be completely dependent on the US for natural gas. It's going to have a process of deindustrialization. The impact of that, it's massive. We are talking about 50 years of prosperity, which is put on the trash overnight. I mean, people, do they realize that actually there's no replacement for that gas? They are going to, shut down companies. They are going to be cold in the winter. The next 5 to 6 years is going to be dramatic, but the impact is the next 20 to 30 years. And who benefits from the crime? This is a question that, I think it's really insulting from the media. They're insulting their viewers because they never question simple question. Cui bono, to who benefits the crime? It's very sad, and we have people like you guys and myself. I define myself as average Joe. I'm doing this not because I like it. I don't like it. I'd rather be with my family, enjoy with my son. I'm doing this because you have thousands of journalists out there. They have a political agenda. They are what we call prostitutes. They are paid to do what they do, to lie to their own people. And where it's leading towards war. We need to avoid war. And it's a vicious circle. I just wish people had, at least, I think what we can do is at least teaching people how to, just question things. Go back to history also, because everything, you cannot understand what is happening right now if you don't go back to history. When it comes to Ukraine, you need to go back at least to 2014. But even earlier, the creation of Ukraine, basic stuff. Ukraine, 300 years ago, there was no country, didn't exist. It was artificial construction. Crimea has 50 years, the Donbass a little bit more, but those are all Russian. It's an anomaly in Russian history, and people don't know the basics really. But why? Because we are into a society where it's people need to take shortcuts. Who's the good? Who's the bad? It's like a movie. When people they haven't started the movie, they miss the first 20 minutes and they go into a movie and it's like, oh, who's the good guy? Who's the bad guy? You missed what happened before. You're gonna, it's not a snapshot. You cannot have a snapshot on Ukraine and say, oh, Russia is the aggressor. Well, if history started yesterday, yes. But history didn't start yesterday. You need to do your homework. It takes time. People don't have that. And why do they don't have that? Because that's our society, Most people, they work 24/7. They have 3 jobs. They have a hard time, they're in pain. And they are used by the system, So do they have time for that? No, average Joe doesn't have time, When you watch the news, you need to, he's into this mind, which is reptilian mind, good, bad, that's how people are. They are into a survival mode where, it's like good, bad, you tell them Putin, oh, bad. You tell them China, oh, bad. They don't even know why. But, I tell you why. Watch the movies, Hollywood movies of the last 50 years. Have you ever seen a Chinese picture in a positive way? No. Have you
even
seen
Russian? Even
Russian
is gangsters.
Gangsters is a mafia guy. If it's a woman, that's a prostitute. That's how it's been demonized. So in the subconscious mind, because that's the subconscious mind of people, that's how they think, then shortcuts. China communists, oh, bad. Oh my God. Think about it. Communists? They were eating babies, you see, in World War I, they were, in France, people were convinced that Germans were eating babies. Really, but it hasn't evolved much. People are very simplistic. It's just that they haven't been out really. They haven't been out. I'm not saying China is good, Russia is good. But it's you cannot simplify. At least what I'm asking people is, do your homework. Your opinions, I respect any opinions. Really, I will respect Taliban in Afghanistan. I will respect all the opinions. But you know what? Do your homework. If you've done your homework, you've studied, then you come up with an opinion, then I respect it. If you haven't done your opinion and you open your mouth, well, I would say shut up. Shut up. Do your homework first.
Exactly.
Then I will respect you when you give your opinion. But if you are regurgitating what the Western media is saying, well, you know what? I can't do much for you, really.
Yeah, I mean, I watch a lot of Hollywood films as well. I mean, the whole production in Ukraine is just like a Hollywood film. And I compared Zelensky to the Mandarin in Iron Man 3. I mean, this is a complete production. He's standing in front of the green screen. Every time he comes on, he's taking speeches from famous leaders of the past. Somebody's doing his speech writing for him. He's got even a fake voice. He's almost like, almost like a
No,
deep
no,
voice. Yeah.
I tell you, AG, he's taking testosterone. Only testosterone give you a voice like this.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
know,
and,
the
and
guy
then
has been going through transformation physically. You know,
yeah, yeah,
that
exactly,
is that is
definitely.
testosterone. I
Yeah,
tell
and
you,
the whole thing is fake. If you look at the Vogue magazine picture he did with his wife, it is so fake. And not only that, he's got the wedding ring on his wrong finger. So if you're about,
That's actually the reason for that. Just for the step in for the wedding ring
yeah,
is Eastern European countries, as I know, I wear it on my right hand.
but he wears it on
Most
his
East,
middle finger, right? Is that right?
oh, you meant middle.
Yeah,
Well,
he got it
I
in his
should
middle
screw
finger.
over that one.
Yeah,
Anyway, yeah,
he's
go
got
ahead.
it. I mean, I'll show you the picture. He's got it on his middle finger, and I just don't think anybody. That's right. And I think this is why I think his marriage is a sham, because every time he goes out begging to other countries, you know, when he's not doing it, his wife is doing it, and it's all a show. You know, he did that signing where he wants to join NATO, and you can see the different camera angles. It's almost like it's a Hollywood production movie. You got the different camera angles, the close-ups when he was signing. You know, you had the long shots, you had the two security guards standing next to him, and the whole thing is like a production. And he's a perfect actor to do it, because he used to be an actor, and he's the perfect person to fill this role. And you go back to Hollywood, for example, you have, you know, a couple of films come to mind, like Rambo 3, when the Mujahideen were shown to be heroes and freedom fighters, and a couple of years later USA is bombing them, you know, because they turn into the Talibans. uh, and there is another film actually in Amazon. It's called Hunters, and it's got Robert De Niro, and Robert De Niro, obviously a great actor
it's
of
a
his time.
great movie. That's one of my favorite hunters.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and and in that film, you know, they basically hunt Nazis in the United States, hidden Nazis in high positions. And you know, basically there's all these Nazis, and he goes around hunting these Nazis and stuff. And then in the Oscars, he's standing up for Ukraine, because he's completely forgotten about everything that he's done in his program. The fact that there's all these hidden Nazis in USA and running the country, and he's going around killing them. But then he forgets, you know, he's standing up for Ukraine, saying, you know, yeah, we stand with Ukraine. I mean, do you even like watch your own programs? Do you even know what you're even doing? Uh, yeah, it's just there's so many Hollywood films. Yeah, you're 100% right. It's it's light and dark. They're trying to picture it. I mean, there's also a lot of YouTube channels who I've seen with millions of followers. They also coming up with saying, "Oh, look at Russia invading Ukraine for no reason, no apparent reason. Do you actually do your homework?" And these are channels who have got millions of viewers, and still to this day they're yabbering on along the same narrative. I don't know if they're being paid or something, because, or they're being paid to believe in their own lies. And you know, there's about 2 or 3 major YouTube channels that are doing that. And not only that, you know, I'm not talking about Russia, Ukraine. I'm also talking about China as well. The news that comes out of China, and all these YouTube channels just pick on it at the same time. It's unbelievable. And I want to pick on what you said, Angelo. I mean, people, you're right. People do have 2, 3 jobs. They don't have time. But you got to also look at the influence of social media. Twitter, for example, if Twitter want to spread out a certain story, they can do it. For example, Russia invading Ukraine. Russia is the bad guy. Ukraine is the good guy. They will make sure that stuff gets retweeted, trending at the top. But if somebody tries to say something otherwise, saying, "Hang on a second, what about, you know, what about the truth? What about Ukraine bombing Donbass for all these years? What about all of these other? What about the you know, the Minsk
Hmm.
agreements?" They will make sure that story never gets out. It never gets trended. And this is how the social media companies control the masses, because they know a lot of people are busy, they don't have time. So as soon as you open social media, first story you see Russia invading Ukraine. Russia's a bad guy, Ukraine's a good guy. And this is how they control the masses. They also control the masses using obviously the media. And then you also got television as well. I mean, television, they have gone on this woke route, complete. I mean, you've seen how Hollywood has changed over the last 5 to 10 years. They have completely gone into virtual signaling. Everything's woke nowadays. They're all trying to send out a message, and this is how they're trying to control the masses. And you can see people, and it's working. People, everyday people, are dumbed down compared to what they were 20 years ago. 20 years ago, I used to speak to people. I used to have really intelligent conversations. Nowadays, if I try and speak to someone, they know more about what's happening in Love Island than they know about what's happening around the world. And it's absolutely shocking. Over to you, Alex.
Yeah, I mean, these things, I mean, what really gets people watching, right? Now, is this a war that people are actually tuning into because they actually care? Is it good for the networks? Or is it good for, other weapon companies that are trying to sell weapons? Is it a great time to promote weapons? I mean, we have to really look at why this is put together and how it came together so quickly, so fast, and so heavily financed. Like, we are talking some big, big money here. And, the world is just trying to heal after coming out of these pandemic. And then you have this come in. And why has no one, Angela, this is something I ask AJ all the time. Where's diplomacy in all of this? Where is one elected member in one of the EU states that hasn't said, hey, enough is enough, guys. Let's get to the table here. We don't want our citizens to freeze over the winter. Where are we? Where's Switzerland in this? Where are they saying, hey, you know what, Russia, you know what, Ukraine, sit down, guys. We got to work this out, or we're gonna torpedo everybody's economy. I mean, where's the diplomacy? I ask this all the time. I'm curious, what happened to it? Where did it go?
Well, for a politician in Europe, it would be suicidal just to go against the mainstream media, the mainstream narrative. And there's no courageous politicians that do that. And actually, sadly, the opposition is coming for what they call the far right. I don't define them as far right. The term itself, far, either right or left, is actually given by the elites or the mainstream media. But you have those conservative party, ADF in Germany. You have the Le Pen in France. They actually are, they're coming with a different discourse on this. Saying, well, you need to wake up, and they're exposing this whole hypocrisy about the Ukraine. But it's going slowly. You see, the thing is that it takes time, and there's slowly a shift. If you do a survey right now, compared to 6 months ago, you have people that are growing tired of that. They're starting to see the impact on inflation, and they realize, well, they've been fooled. But it takes time. It takes time. How many times we've been fooled? You see,
I agree.
In Iraq, they needed the momentum. They needed the momentum. Once they got the momentum, they went all in. They didn't have the support from the international community back then. But you see, they had to go fast, build up. You had all those. When you had the incubator, this girl that came out, and that was the shift. That was a defining moment. That's what they're trying to do in Ukraine actually right now. They need a false flag operation where you can get people on board. The same as Pearl Harbor. The US, keep in mind, the US, they didn't care about Europe. Europe was being destroyed. Actually, the US was more anti-communist than anti-Hitler in World War II. They came into the war because of Pearl Harbor. That single event made the US to come into the war. But otherwise, the US was happy to see Europe being destroyed, and they were waiting. They actually financed both sides. At the beginning, they were supporting Hitler. Once they saw that Hitler was winning, they supported the USSR, and that's how they did. And if you look at what is happening right now, well, the US wants to fight Russia to the last Ukrainian. If not enough, it will be to the last European. Now, if you look at China, they want to fight China to the last Taiwanese. If not enough, it will be to the last Japanese. But they don't fight wars. The US don't fight war. What they do is that they sell weapons, they do the propaganda, they cheer and so on, and they get to rewrite history and make Hollywood movies where they were the good guy and they saved the world, while the world is being destroyed. If you learn about World War II, the US came at the end. It got to the point where it had 75% of world gold reserves and 50% of GDP because the rest of the world was completely destroyed. It came at the end. And at the end, the US, they got to rewrite the rule of the games. They were behind the creation of the UN. The UN actually, it was based on US hegemony at the beginning. It's not that much democratic, not the ideal system. It means 5 countries have a right of veto, for example. Then it came in with the IMF. It came in with the World Bank, and it imposed upon the world the dollar hegemony. Keep in mind, the ultimate power is the currency, the hegemony of the currency. Rothschild was very smart. He said, I don't need political power, but just give me the right to print money, have my hands on the finance, and I'll be happy with that, because you control the money, you control everything. And here, the bigger game, if you look at the bigger picture, that's the dollar. And if you look at what is happening, it's been a gradual. Russia and China have been at war against the globalist elite that are backing the dollar, that are controlling the dollar. They've been at war for the last probably 20, 30 years. It was not done slowly. China, if you look at the single project of Belt and Road Initiative, Belt and Road Initiative is part of the agenda of China of de-dollarization, because China is a US dollar trade surplus, meaning whenever you sell more than what you buy, you end up with extra dollars. If the US wants you to recycle this excess of dollars into US economy, either US economy by buying goods, or you buy US bonds, meaning you buy the debt of the US. So it's a Ponzi scheme. By creating the Belt and Road Initiative, what the China did was to stop the Ponzi scheme. Now, the US trade deficit is financed by printing money. That creates inflation. And China has, with the Belt and Road Initiative, has killed many birds with one stone. Because Belt and Road Initiative, it helps the neighbors. It helps. It's good for Chinese market. Basically, they have extra capacity and they need to sell more goods. They have access to raw material. If you build road in Africa, then African countries are going to be able to sell you their natural resources, and it's a good way just to kill the US dollar. So you see, there's a we need to have go micro and macro, and the ultimate war is the US dollar war, and there was there was a new paradigm. Russia started with a new paradigm, by starting to impose the ruble to trade their currency. And you see, Russia started, then you have Saudi Arabia, which is going to start to trade its dollar, its oil against yuan, and it's starting, and this is going to be the collapse of the US dollar hegemony and the Western hegemony.
Yeah, so many good points there, Angelo, and you're right. I mean, they sound like they will be using Japan, people in Taiwan as well, not forgetting people in South Korea and Australia as well, if there is ever a conflict in the Taiwanese Strait. And they've already started. I mean, you have the Chip 4 bill, which Biden recently signed. This basically bans all South Korean companies to have factories or businesses in China. If they do, they get sanctioned. Same way with Japan. And so the US, even though they want a trade war with China, they are now pushing their allies into their own trade war, to the displeasure of South Korean people and to the displeasure of Japanese as well. However, the people do not have a choice. It seems like the government do not have a choice. And the same way, if there was ever a war over the Taiwanese Strait, US will use this exercise, using it, Japan's military bases, launch attacks from there. They will use South Korean military bases, launch attacks from there. And this puts South Korea and Japan in as targets, basically. I mean, China will have no choice but to attack back, and it will just cause mayhem. And you have the Australians as well, cyber rattling as well. Completely right. I mean, US loves to fight battles from a distance, and this goes back to the Korean War and the Vietnam War, where bodies were flown back, and once people started seeing American bodies being flown back, that's when people started rising up. They demanded a change of government, and they demanded a change of policy. They wanted their troops out. So this is why, during the Iraq War, they banned, filming of Iraqi, soldiers that were fighting in Iraq, American soldiers. They banned the filming of these soldiers arriving home in body bags, completely banned it, because they know images like that normally turns the country. So since then, they have started this proxy war around the world, where they fight from a distance and they use other people. Especially, you look at Iraq, you have the coalition of the willing, they call it, and they obviously had NATO involved and other countries involved. And then you look at what they're doing with Ukraine. They're fighting Russia till every single last Ukrainian, and now, like you said, every single last European. With Nuland saying "F the EU," no, they don't really care about the EU. I mean, and then the same thing with China. They're encircling China. They're using Japan. They're using South Korea. They're using Australia. And poorly, the Taiwanese people will suffer, because it's not the Taiwanese people who want a war. I mean, they want peace. They want a peaceful solution. It's the USA who's pushing things like getting Pelosi to really antagonize things. They're pushing things, really antagonizing things around the world. And like I said, they love fighting from a distance. They love other countries to be the punching bag, or to be the guinea pig in any conflict. They're quite happily start wars in other parts of the world, as long as their American citizens are safe. They happily cause mayhem and chaos all around the world. And yeah, and you're right. There's so many points that you said, Angelo, but I'll pass you over to Alex. Let him have a say first.
No, I'm following, Angelo's line of thought. And you see, I think we've been spoon-fed so much garbage here that we're seeing a pushback, not only from viewers, but we're also seeing the demise of corporate news. And just when you think it got low, it continues to get lower. And it's now the media machines that think what they're saying. I used to think it was an integrity issue. I thought, these guys, they must be concerned about their integrity. But no, actually, they've bought into this. And they're also deeply brainwashed by this. And they can't see out of it. Like Fox News reporting yesterday, and I'm not going to bring it onto the show because it's politically sensitive, but they're reporting on the events that happened in China yesterday were just repulsive and disgusting. I can't discuss it on this show because, I think that I need to have some respect for people that do have an illness. And it was, and that's all I'm going to get into. I think the panel knows exactly what I'm talking about. There's something about respecting people, respecting health conditions and all that. But these media machines, they can wake up any morning and they can destroy someone's life in a heartbeat. Now, how can we push back against that? Well, is being canceled a way to, be silenced by these machines? They can wipe out you economically. Okay, that's another way. And it gets complicated. And then you see other channels like Rumble come on. Rumble starts a platform. Parler starts a platform. All these platforms get started. And you see, here's how I view the media machines and Silicon Valley. Okay? In one example, does anyone remember certain countries, don't even have to name them, they used to start a big fire, and then they would take books and they would throw them into the fire. They would burn books, burn history, burn whatever. When someone's getting canceled or their account gets taken off platforms, it's modern day book burning by these platforms. They are burning up anyone's digital existence, okay? I think the last real printed book on some historical facts are encyclopedias, right? Would you guys agree with me on that?
Yep.
And I think the last edition of, I think it was Britannica Encyclopedias. Can somebody look that up for me while I'm talking, when the last edition of Britannica Encyclopedias was sold? Yes, you're right. Ray Bradbury, Fahrenheit 451, Rolf. I remember that.
I read that one.
Okay.
Too.
This is what we're witnessing right now. And they're wiping people off digitally. Now, I got something interesting I want to tell this audience. And here, I think, is what motivated me. Because in my lifetime, and in Angelo's lifetime, the internet, to us, we weren't born with the internet. At 26 years old, the internet came into my life. And I can tell you, now, maybe if the audience can put their ages in there, you know, we'll give you a plus or minus 5 years. Okay, guys, it doesn't matter. Okay. But when the internet came into my life at 26 years old, that was a revolution for me.
Yep.
I said, wow. Okay. I went almost 7 days without sleep, because the amount of knowledge and information that was pouring into me, I thought, holy cow, I get to see stuff. I get to read stuff. And I was reading about, you know, mysterious places.
Yep.
Germany came to mind. East Germany. I was reading all these facts, all this stuff. And I was curious. And I remember that time so vivid, what I was looking to search for, what I was reading, what I was trying to understand. It was stuff that I couldn't get my hands on at the local library. And many years passed, and a couple of years ago, my sister, who works for the school division in Canada, I phoned her up and I said, is there a way of checking what books came into libraries and the curriculum and what books were brought in? And she said, yeah, that's a strange request. Why are you asking that, Alex? I said, I want you to tell me the first book that came into my town, my library, on anything east of Germany. When did it come in to the library? What year? So she said, that's bizarre, but I'll call the librarian. They'll get the Dewey Decimal System up. We'll let you know, Alex, no problem. Well, a week went by. Another week went by. And then the third week went by. She phoned me. She said, the first books that came out, you know, Soviet Union and all that stuff, were brought into circulation in 1997. I said, well, isn't that interesting? 1 year after the internet was kind of got mainstream, they decided to bring these books into our libraries in Canada. That's bizarre. Why didn't I have any access to this information? And that says to me right there that even as a young guy in school, my learning ability on geopolitical was limited to what my country wanted it to be. And then the internet opens up. And now these guys are saying, wait a minute, the gig is up. Surprise, surprise. All the answers that you want can be, or all the questions that you ask can be answered. Oh, And if you ask too much, if you question too much, then we'll just, with one click, we'll delete you from the internet and we'll throw that digital existence into the fire. And that's what I think we're witnessing right now, where people are getting smarter. People like you, the viewers, are tuning into this show and you're realizing, wait a minute, I haven't seen that. I don't see that on Western media. I don't see that on my news channel.
Yeah.
I see it with guys like AJPT. I see it with Angela. I see it with Alex. What's going on here? That's right. Ask your librarian when these books, ask him when the books started to come in that you could study China. I bet you some of them aren't even there. I bet you some of those shelves are empty. It's incredible. AJ.
Exactly. I think Angela has to go, so I'm going to finish up very quickly. I want to ask Angela, I want you to talk about Hong Kong, really, and especially what happened with the UK, Hong Kong, Chinese consulate as well, because we wanted to kind of discuss that in this program. So obviously, I've seen the images where Palestinians would march in front of the Israeli embassy. They would get arrested just by holding a flag. I've seen Iraqis outside the US embassy holding an Iraqi flag. They would get arrested. But when you have these rioters in Hong Kong outside the Chinese consulate, they're classed as heroes. And this guy who actually walked into there's images of him walking into the Chinese consulate, and he was going in there. Nobody dragged him in. He was going in there. Why is he classed as a hero when you have a Chinese consulate member being kicked to the head? You know, anyone being kicked to the head, they can cause serious brain damage, and that person could die. I mean, these are thugs. These are people who have the intent to kill, and he was being kicked to the head, and the whole Western media is completely ignoring that. And I wanted to get your thoughts on that, Angelo. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, what you saw at the consulate, the Chinese consulate, was just a tiny fractions of what I experienced here firsthand in Hong Kong. I mean, those were thugs. They were silencing us, what we called here in Hong Kong a silent majority. They were extremely radicals. You know, they were calling for mutual destruction. Well, they said, if we burn, you will burn with us. You know, it's this whole intimidation where people wouldn't dare to speak up anymore. You know, they would jump in the street. You know, you would actually, you would oppose them. They would jump on you, 10 people on you, and beat you up to the blood. I mean, no matter, I mean, they did that to women. I mean, really, like 10 people jumping on that. It was actually dozens every single day, beatings in the street. And they were like destroying. It was just, they wanted to overthrow the government. And actually, if you look at the definition of terrorism, that's what they were doing. You use violence to achieve a political goal. That's what they were doing. And they, I mean, luckily it didn't go into, you know, like putting, they had actually, they even put a few bombs, actually 500 meters from our house. They actually put a small bomb, you know, man-made bomb.
Wow.
So it was going to a very bad direction. It was, and I want to point out one thing, you know, like, because the Western media, they were pointing out that there was a police violence. You know, there was not a single death. You know, there was 12 months of riots, extremely violent riots. There was not a single death. The only person that died was killed by the protesters. You know, someone that was cleaning the streets.
Yeah.
He got, they threw a stone on him and he died. But otherwise, you know, no major injuries from the protesters. And I'm going to compare to the police violence in France. You know, in France, you have 10 people that died, you know, when you had the yellow vest protest. 10 people died. You had over 30 people that lost an eye. You have dozens of people that lost a hand, you know, because they were, you know, they thought it was some of those bombs, you know, like small bombs, you know, like it makes a huge noise, but they thought it was like gas bomb, you know. So you see, and they dare to call Hong Kong police violent. They was absolutely not violent at all. I have so much respect for that police, you know. So in reality, it's interesting when you look at the West, they call China a police state. That's hilarious. In China, when you live in China, Alex, you can confirm that. But when you live in China, Chinese police are servant of the people. They're actually giving you a service, and they will not resort to violence. They will not resort to violence unless you hit them. But that's not the role of police. They're supposed to serve you, and that's the opposite that happened in the West. And they dare to call China a police state. That's hilarious.
On that front, guys, let's call it an end. Thanks, Angelo. It's been an honor,
Pleasure.
absolute honor speaking to you today. We have learned a lot from you, and will you be happy to come in again and chat to us? Because there's a lot we
Absolutely.
have to talk about. There's so much subjects. I also want to thank everyone that's joined in, tuned in. Make sure, guys, like, subscribe, and thanks especially to the moderators out there. Back to you, Alex.
Thank you.
Guys, take it away. This is your show. You boys end it, and I'll cue in the music, and we'll let everybody chat in the side box. And you guys have a great evening. Take it away, AJ.
Thanks, Alex. Yeah, thanks, guys, for everything. I really appreciate you guys tuning in. It's been a busy day today. 2 live streams, 2 buses.